eye exams reducing strokes and heart attacks, Putin's ties to corruption in Guatemala, botched surgery, plus a look at the surge in oil and gas prices across the country. I'm Martin Rather. This is The Underreported. If you filled up your gas tank recently, you've no doubt noticed a 20 to 30 cent increase at the pump. This week we bring you an exclusive report on why gas prices are not only rising higher, but why geopolitical tensions could lead to an even larger spike in gas prices this summer. I sat down in New York with Jessica Summers, an energy markets reporter for Bloomberg News, to discuss both how high prices can go and what may be driving them upwards.
So essentially, when we're talking about pump prices, it looks like it's going to be a little bit of a costlier summer compared to last year. So consumers should really plan accordingly when planning their road trips or summer vacations. So the U.S. Energy Information Administration recently released their summer fuels outlook, and they are forecasting gasoline prices, the U.S. regular gasoline price, to average 14% more this summer than last summer. Why? Because of crude oil. So because crude oil is up higher than last summer, they are seeing that as one of the main reasons why we should see higher gas prices.
There is, of course, a direct correlation between oil prices and pump prices for gasoline. But what about the geopolitical tensions that go into the original price of oil?
Saudi Arabia and Yemen, there's ballistic missiles flying over Riyadh, there was the missile strike in Syria, and now the tensions over whether or not sanctions will be imposed on Iran. And you'll likely see prices rise because of the riskiness, right? I mean, if you're unsure about where supplies are going to be, if you think countries will have to cut back supply because of this fighting, because of these tensions, oil prices will rise.
However, for the U.S. economy overall, there's some good news on the production side, which could even lead to lower prices. How does U.S. supply fit into the picture?
So growing U.S. production is a constant concern and a constant downside risk for the oil rally we've been seeing. And even Citibank has come out and said, look, U.S. is on track to be on par with Saudi Arabia and Russia in terms of production going forward. So to break it down for you, the U.S. is producing, let's say, over 10.5 million barrels a day right now. Saudi Arabia is producing just under 10 million barrels a day. So you could see that the U.S. is really catching up to these big players.
We sent our reporters on assignment across the country to visit gas stations. Here's what they learned.
It makes it a little more difficult trying to get to and from my other job. My boyfriend getting to Bastrop for his drill with the Army. It just makes things a little bit more difficult, especially having a truck. It's hard. A lot more gas on a truck than in a car, and depending on what kind of vehicle you have and the gas mileage on it, it can get crazy. I don't know how you could go to college and afford something like that.
It's Manhattan, so you got to pay to be on the island. But at my house in Nashville, it's $2.50 a gallon. So I feel bad for the people that live here all the time and have to always pay this. It's cheaper in Nashville.
So have you heard that this summer gas prices could go up 30, 40, 50%?
I have not heard that.
If you had to pay $5 or $6 a gallon this summer, how would that affect your life?
I think I'd probably take a city bike everywhere. Can I take a city bike to Nashville?
And now, on to our national correspondents. Researchers at Google may be a few steps closer to helping prevent heart attacks and strokes through eye exams. Olivia Leveda from California brings us more.
What if your eye doctor could examine your eyes and tell you your risk of having a heart attack or stroke within the next 5 years? That is exactly what researchers from Google did in their study released in the Nature Biomedical Engineering journal. According to the study, cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death worldwide. A typical screening for cardiovascular disease risk evaluates risk factors such as the patient's age, gender, smoking status, blood pressure, body mass index, glucose levels, and cholesterol levels. As noted in the study, some of these risk factors may often be unavailable, but blood vessels can be viewed from photographs of the retina. The researchers used an artificial intelligence algorithm to examine the retina for cardiovascular disease risk factors like high systolic blood pressure in order to predict a person's risk of experiencing a major cardiovascular event within a certain certain amount of years. Although there is more research to be done, researchers hope the method will make it easier for doctors to quickly analyze the risk of their patients having a heart attack or stroke. From California, I'm Olivia Leveda, The Underreported.
An anti-corruption commission in Guatemala is under scrutiny in Washington over alleged ties to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Vaughn Golden with the story from the Capitol.
A few weeks ago, before they went on recess, a bipartisan group of senators and congressmen known as the Helsinki Commission, a group that oversees the relationship with security in Europe, heard testimony in the case of the Bitkovs, a group of Russian nationals who migrated to Guatemala and were later persecuted by an anti-corruption group within Guatemala. And that anti-corruption group, SIGSI, is overseen by the United Nations. So the Bitkovs were prosecuted for minor paperwork issues with their move to Guatemala. Previous to that, they were under prosecution from the Russian government and were terrorized by the Russian government and forced them to move to Guatemala in the first place. So this makes it significant in that SIGSI is funded half by funds coming from the United States. So if the United States decides to pull out those funds, they could essentially remove the teeth from this anti-corruption group in Guatemala. So the commission heard this hearing, and there is already existing talk in Washington about defunding SIGSI, so adding this testimony on top of it does not help that cause. If they do remove those cause, it could allow more corruption, or less corruption investigations and more corruption within Guatemala. Now the Russian part of this is also another issue as well. One of the main testimony within the hearing a few weeks ago was by one of the lawyers crucial to the Magnitsky Act, which describes a lot of the current U.S. policy towards Russia's involvement in other countries' affairs. From Washington, I'm Vaughn Golden, The Underreported.
Next up, the story of one woman's battle with her doctor over botched surgical implants. De'Ara Banks from Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas, has more.
Imagine receiving a phone call to inform you that your medical implants needs to be removed immediately, or you might die. An Arkansas woman, Jerry Plummer, was scared by such a call. Just days later, she had her bladder mesh implant removed in a shopping mall medical office in Orlando. Plummer had been assured by the woman on the phone, identified only as Yolanda, that the cost would be paid for and that Plummer would get help suing the maker of the mesh. The New York Times reports Plummer had stumbled into a growing industry involving lawyers, marketers, finance companies, and doctors. Women are convinced to have often unnecessary implant removal surgery, becoming more lucrative plaintiffs for lawsuits against medical device manufacturers. Some felt rushed into having the surgery. Doctors involved in the scheme made about $3,500 per surgery. 4 or 5 procedures a day could net more than $14,000. The women are offered loans to pay for the surgeries, to be repaid at a high interest rate if they receive money from their lawsuit. The loans are backed by banks, private equity firms, and hedge funds. Other companies, such as Law Cash, named in Plummer's suit, specialize in lending cash to hopeful plaintiffs. The law firm involved in Plummer's case now has clients sign a waiver stating that cash advances to pay for surgery, quote, are terrible loans with extremely high interest rates. Here in Huntsville, Texas, I'm De'Ara Banks, The Underreported.
And now, we'll end as we always do by looking back and then looking forward. Except, today will be a little different in our subject matter. Usually we use this time to look back on an event in history and then look forward to related news that is expected this week. However, for this program, we'll turn the camera on ourselves and note that this is the final episode for this part of our journey for The Underreported. Looking back, The Underreported began in the summer of 2017 with a conversation at a small fast casual restaurant where the subject came up, does anyone do news without Trump, without panels, without advertisements? Journalism that highlights young voices. It was decided that if it was to be, it would be up to us. And after a few iterations, we ultimately came up with the concept for The Underreported, which is a 10-minute weekly news show that has now managed to put out over 20 programs. I'm beyond proud of our growth. Take a look at a clip from our first episode. The Commerce Department, since 2000, has now granted 98% of all dumping claims, signaling a protectionist shift in this part of U.S. trade policy decades in the making. I hardly think that I could have clutched that notebook any harder. But after an initial run on my Facebook page, we were able to learn the right formats and do our best to connect with all of you through News and Guts. Now, on our 11th episode to their millions of followers, it's time for us to take a short break. Looking forward, this is the end of our semester for our team. Many, including myself, are taking the next step and graduating from college. We want to do our best to continue the program, but we don't have the details just yet, so we're stepping back. We'd love to hear your thoughts on how this can be made into the best possible newscast. I think that if you asked anyone involved on this program about their favorite part of the Underreported, it isn't the awards or the press coverage or the international viewership. It's this team. My sincere gratitude to all 40 of my fellow students for coming together to make this program work. From the correspondents at schools across the country, to our robust producing and fact-checking team here in Huntsville, to the students who man the cameras, check the sound, and edit the program, it's difficult enough to get a group of college students together for anything, much less to put in work each week on a national news program. There's no sponsors, no budget, just a bunch of special people who forfeited sleep to put this program out there. I'm confident that you'll be hearing their names in the national conversation far beyond this show. And my gratitude to each and every one of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to watch, comment, and share this newscast. It has been our honor to bring news as a public service to all of you every week. For the Underreported, I'm Martin Rather, joined here by our team from Sam Houston State University. Thank you.